The hum of synthetic bees drifted across the fields like a chorus of distant violins, rising and falling beneath the twin suns of Rin. Their wings shimmered with microparticle dust, refracting the amber light into a halo that bathed everything in soft gold. Jalen Vor moved slowly among the hives, his gloved fingers tracing over their smooth, translucent casings. Each contained a living algorithm, a fusion of biology and machine, engineered to pollinate the fragile ecosystems of off-world colonies. To the farmers of Rin, they were drones. To Jalen, they were a kind of prayer. He whispered to them as he worked. Not commands, not data strings, but gentle words meant to keep rhythm with the pulse of their wings. It was his way of remembering that the world was still alive, even out here, in a system where metal outweighed soil and stars were bought and sold. His bees had no true hearts, yet somehow they understood him. The hum would rise in answer when he spoke. A soft chime echoed from the horizon, the sound of approaching transport crafts. Jalen looked up, wiping the honey dust from his palms. 3 consortium patrol gliders cut across the skies, sleek and silver, their engines singing the high-pitched tone of military regulation. He frowned. The shipment wasn't due for another week. And the honey, he'd just sealed the final containers for the council's ceremonial banquet. The gliders descended in formation, stirring cyclones of pollen and sand. The insignia of the Xylan enforcers gleamed on their sides, a blade encircled by an unbroken ring. Jalen stepped back, shielding his eyes from the blast. The air turned sharp and electric. Jalen Vor, came a voice over the external comms, filtered through static and authority. By decree of the Consortium Security Tribunal, you are hereby detained for crimes of contamination and subversion against the Council. He didn't move. For a heartbeat, the only sound was the faint buzz of the bees returning to their hives. Then the soldiers appeared, 5 of them, armored in mirror-black exosuits, each one carrying a plasma restraint device. Their faces were hidden behind reflective visors, their movements synchronized, mechanical. "There's been a mistake," Jalen began, his voice steady, but his chest tight. "My shipments are monitored, triple-tested. You can check the logs." One of the soldiers stepped forward and struck him across the face with a shock baton. Pain lanced through him, bright and quick. He fell to one knee, the taste of iron filling his mouth. "Mistakes," said the commander, her voice cool through the helmet, "don't poison half the High Council." He froze. Poison. The words didn't make sense. The honey was pure, filtered through nanocomb reactors that removed every toxin. It was impossible. Unless. He thought of the last inspection. A technician he didn't recognize, quiet, quick with her hands, logging access to his vats under the consortium's clearance codes. He hadn't thought twice about it then. But now. The commander seized his wrist, locking a restraint around it. The band hissed, sealing to his skin like molten glass. His neural link to the hives flickered and went dark. The hum in the air faltered, as though the bees themselves felt the severing. "You've been sentenced," the commander said, her tone almost bored. "Effective immediately. Your case is classified under Article 17. Jalen's heart pounded. Article 17 was whispered about in mining colonies, in taverns, in the shadows of slave docks, a punishment meant for those the council didn't want returning. A living execution. 2 soldiers dragged him toward the glider. The hives behind him began to pulse in disarray, their order collapsing. The bees swarmed in confused patterns, a shimmering storm that reached toward him as though trying to follow. One broke formation and landed softly on his hand. It flickered once, then dimmed, its signal lost. When the transport doors closed around him, the world outside vanished into metallic silence. The air smelled of ozone and fear. Hours later, or maybe days, time no longer had rhythm, they brought him to the prison orbit. He saw it through the viewport, the Xylan Bastion, a massive structure suspended above the gas giant Tyrian 4, its hull black as obsidian and veined with blue energy conduits. The station's architecture was brutal, all sharp edges and impossible angles. From certain viewpoints, it seemed to fold into itself, vanishing into light. Inside, the corridors pulsed with artificial gravity and the faint hum of containment fields. The guards did not speak. The only sound was the echo of his boots on the metal floor, and the occasional mechanical sigh of the air recyclers. They led him into a chamber lined with observation glass. Beyond it was a cell, a circular pit surrounded by magnetic fields that shimmered faintly in the dim light. And inside that pit, something moved. He caught the briefest glimpse of scales that glowed like molten iron, of wings bound by energy chains, of eyes that burned golden and alive. The air trembled. "That," said the warden, his voice a low rumble from behind reinforced armor, "is Experiment D-01. Last of the Dracarian breed. Engineered for planetary warfare. Uncontainable. Unkillable. You will share her confinement until expiration." Jalen turned, disbelief anchoring his breath. "You're throwing me in there? That thing, she'll tear me apart." The warden didn't answer. The guards shoved him forward. The door hissed open, a brief flash of blue, and he was cast into the pit. He hit the ground hard, rolling to a stop. The air was thick, metallic, charged with heat. He could smell something like burning stone, and beneath it, a faint sweetness, like singed nectar. When he lifted his head, she was there. The dragon girl. Her chains hummed, her chest rose and fell with restrained fury. Her pupils, thin and slit like a predator's, locked onto him. The silence between them was sharp enough to cut. She tilted her head, nostrils flaring. Then she spoke, her voice rough, unused, but unmistakably human. "You smell alive." And for the first time, Jalen realized the punishment wasn't about killing him quickly. It was about watching something gentle meet something born of fire, and seeing which would burn first. The air inside the cell pulsed with heat, waves of it rolling from the walls like breath from a forge. The faint blue shimmer of the magnetic field painted everything in ghost light, flickering whenever the creature's restraint strained against their limits. Jalen sat against the far wall, his back pressed to the cool alloy, trying to slow his heartbeat. Across from him, the dragon girl crouched in the half-dark, her body coiled like living flame, scales shifting from deep bronze to ember red whenever she moved. Her eyes, those molten irises, followed every motion he made. Hours passed without words. The guards above watched through transparent panels, but Jalen had stopped noticing them. The only sounds were the low thrum of the field generator and the occasional crackle of energy whenever she twitched her wings. He wondered if she could sleep. If she ever had. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, almost a whisper, as if afraid to disturb the charged air. "Do you have a name?" The creature didn't answer at first. She tilted her head slightly, nostrils flaring as though tasting the sound. Her hair, if it could be called that, was a cascade of metallic filaments that shifted with her breathing, catching stray glimmers of light. When she finally spoke, the words came slowly, rough with disuse. "Calith." The syllables vibrated with strange resonance, as if the name itself had weight, echoing faintly against the magnetic field. Jalen nodded. "Calith," he repeated softly, and the cell seemed to hold its breath. She blinked. Her gaze flicked to his wrists, then to the faded traces of honey still clinging to his sleeve. Her voice was lower now, a growl beneath the words. "You are not like them. You smell of sun and flowers." He almost laughed, though it came out more as a cough. "I'm a beekeeper. Or was. The scent doesn't wash off easily." Calith tilted her head again, studying him like an unfamiliar species. Her tongue flicked over sharp teeth, her scales rippling with faint luminescence. The guards above shifted uneasily. Jalen could imagine their hands resting on emergency triggers. The creature had reduced entire squads to ash once, or so the stories claimed. But she did not lunge. Instead, she sniffed the air once more and let her wings relax, their edges folding with a faint hiss. The silence between them softened. Jalen reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object the guards hadn't noticed, a piece of honeycomb, hardened and crystalline, from his last harvest. He placed it carefully on the floor between them. The glow from the field made it look alive. Kalitha's eyes narrowed. "Is it poison?" "No," he said simply. "It's sweet." For a long moment, she didn't move. Then, slowly, she crawled closer, her movements both graceful and animal, her talons scraping sparks from the floor. When she reached the offering, she lifted it delicately, as if afraid it would dissolve. The scent filled the air, a warm, golden fragrance that didn't belong in this sterile place. She licked it once, her expression unreadable. Then again, slower this time, until the edge of her mouth curved faintly upward. "Warm," she murmured. "It tastes like warmth." Jalen watched, saying nothing. He thought of his hives, the endless hum of life working in harmony. The contrast made his throat tighten. Here, surrounded by cold metal and watchers who saw everything as a variable to control, this creature was tasting something made by care, not programming. Kalith looked at him then, really looked. "They said I would eat you," she said, her voice almost curious. "That you would scream and beg, and I would tear your flesh. That's what they told me before they sent you." He met her gaze steadily. "Do you want to?" The question hung between them, a fragile thing. Her pupils widened. She inhaled deeply, her chest rising, the glow in her scales dimming as though the fire within her cooled. "No," she said finally. "Not now." Above them, faint alarms flickered. The surveillance systems were detecting anomalies, Kalitha's aggression markers dropping below measurable levels, her neural activity synchronizing with human emotional patterns. In the control room, scientists whispered, confused. No subject had ever responded this way. Kalith turned her head upward, her expression tightening. "They are watching." "I know," Jalen said. "They always do." She frowned, then looked back at him. "Why do you not fear me?" He thought for a long moment before answering. "Because fear feeds the wrong things. Bees don't sting what they understand." Her brow furrowed slightly, as though she were deciphering an unfamiliar code. The sound she made was half a huff, half a laugh, brief, untrained, but startlingly human. As the lights dimmed into artificial night, Jalen lay down on the cold metal floor, exhaustion seeping into his bones. He closed his eyes, expecting the sound of movement, the rush of air that would mean his end. Instead, there was only the faint heat radiating from her direction, a low rumble that might have been purring, or the soft growl of something unsure of its own peace. In the observation bay, one of the technicians leaned closer to the screen. The biometric readings showed something impossible, Kalitha's body temperature stabilizing, her heartbeat slowing to match the human's. The AI monitoring the data hesitated, its algorithms rewriting themselves to classify what it saw. Jalen drifted towards sleep, the faint hum of the containment field becoming the same rhythm as his old hives. The last thing he heard before darkness took him was Kalitha's whisper, faint and uncertain. "They told me I was made to kill. But I think I was made to feel fire. You smell like that fire." When he opened his eyes again, she was closer, her vast form curled in the shadows like living armor, her wings folded protectively. Her golden eyes were closed. The heat that filled the cell was no longer threatening. It was the warmth of something alive choosing, for the first time, not to destroy. When the cell's lights brightened to simulated dawn, Jalen awoke to a strange stillness. The usual hum of the containment field had softened, replaced by a rhythm that seemed alive, slow, deep, almost organic. He realized, with a shiver, that the sound came from Kalitha's breathing. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor, her back turned to him, chains draped like molten silver around her shoulders. Steam coiled from the seams of her skin as her body adjusted to the light. He sat up quietly, every motion deliberate, aware that even the smallest sound carried meaning here. The air was thick with the scent of carbon and something faintly sweet, the lingering ghost of the honeycomb. She must have kept it through the night. He saw the crystalline shard resting beside her, untouched since she'd tasted it. It caught the light and reflected it in fractal gold. Without turning, Caliph spoke. "You talk in your sleep." Jalen blinked. "Do I?" "You said, hive," she murmured, testing the word as if it were a new language. "And the name, Vera." He hesitated. "She was my sister." Caliph finally turned her head, one golden eye glancing at him over her shoulder. "Was. She died years ago. A reactor collapse on Helion Station. The bees we use now, their coding started from her research. Every hive that hums out there carries part of her voice." Caliph studied him, her expression unreadable. "You made life from death." He almost smiled. "Or tried to." The field flickered suddenly, a ripple of blue energy that crawled up the walls like lightning trapped under glass. Both of them looked up. The hum sharpened into a piercing frequency, the kind that only machines and monsters could truly hear. Calitha's scales bristled, her wings twitching. "They're increasing the resonance field," she said, her voice darkening. "They want to see what I do when I'm cornered." The air vibrated around them. Energy currents crawled across her body, small arcs of plasma dancing between the scales of her arms. Jalen rose to his feet. "They'll hurt you." She laughed, low and bitter. "They always do." He moved closer, instinct overriding caution. "Caliph, listen to me. Breathe. You can control it." Her claws clenched. Sparks burst from the ground. For a heartbeat, Jalen thought she would unleash everything, flame, fury, destruction. But then her eyes found his, and something shifted. The golden light flickered, dimming to amber. Her breathing slowed. The arcs of energy faded into faint glows before dying altogether. The field alarms silenced. Up in the control deck, confusion spread through the observers. The system's telemetry showed an anomaly. The subject's violent response had inverted into stabilization. Emotional waveforms between the human and the Dracarian overlapped, their neurochemical feedback forming a harmonic pattern. One of the scientists whispered, "They're sinking." Calitha's chains loosened fractionally, the automated restraint system interpreting her calm as compliance. She flexed her hands, staring at her palms as if seeing them for the first time. "It obeys me differently," she murmured. "The heat listens now." Jalen tilted his head. "Maybe it listens to peace the way bees listen to calm." Her gaze flicked toward him again. "Peace," she repeated, as if the word were foreign. Then, quietly, "I've never had that." He reached into the pocket of his prison suit and withdrew a small, cylindrical object, his hive signal relay. The guards had disabled it, but the structure still held faint traces of encoded nanodust. He brushed it against the ground. The dust scattered, forming a shimmering cloud that pulsed faintly with internal light. Caliph watched, entranced. "What are they?" "Fragments of memory," he said. "They used to guide my bees. Now, they're just echoes." The particles drifted upward, swirling between them. Caliph raised a hand, and the light bent toward her. For an instant, the nanodust responded, aligning with her bioelectric field, forming intricate spirals in the air. Jalen stared in awe. "You're resonating with them," he whispered. "Their programming responds to you." She frowned. "They feel alive." "They are, in a way." The display lights in the observation bay dimmed as energy from the nanodust began to interfere with the containment sensors. The AI core monitoring their cell flickered through dozens of emotional recognition subroutines, attempting to categorize the event. Failing that, it did something unprecedented, it paused its analysis. Calitha's voice broke the silence. "Do you think they'll kill us now?" "Maybe," Jalen said softly. Or maybe they'll watch until they learn something new. She tilted her head, considering. Then we give them something they can't understand. Hours blurred into something timeless. She asked him about the surface of Rin, about the way the suns felt on skin, about what honey really was. He described the golden rivers of the hive fields, the way light clung to glass like it didn't want to leave. She listened, her expression softening with each word, her wings folding closer to her body. When fatigue crept over him, he leaned against the wall, eyes half closed. The hum of the cell had changed, it no longer grated, it throbbed with a rhythm not unlike the hum of his hives. He realized then that Caliph was humming, deep in her chest, a low vibration that matched the pulse of the nanodust floating in the air. Your song, he murmured. It feels alive. It's the sound of heat not burning, she said. And when he drifted into uneasy dreams, he saw not fire, but light, spirals of gold and red weaving together, forming a hive made of stars. Somewhere inside that vision, he felt Caliph's warmth beside him, steady and unthreatening. Far above, in the observation bay, the scientists didn't speak. They only watched as two impossible heartbeats fell into sync, and the machine intelligence that observed them began to write something new into its code, a definition of bond that no protocol had ever required. The containment field pulsed, dim and irregular, as though sensing the shift in the air. Jalen had long since stopped trying to measure time. Minutes and hours were meaningless here, only the subtle rhythm of Caliph's breathing, the flicker of her scales, and the faint hum of the nanodust guided him. She was moving closer now, cautious, almost hesitant, her claws scraping softly against the alloy floor. They will try to take you, he said softly, almost to himself. Sooner or later, they'll see the change and intervene. Caliph tilted her head. I do not wish to fight them. You won't have to, if we are smart. Her eyes narrowed, glowing faintly in the low light. Smart is not enough. They built me to destroy. And you've chosen not to, he whispered. She froze, a faint spark of energy crawling across her scales. Chosen? Yes, he said, taking a careful step closer. You choose. You decide what to do, not the sensors, not the chains, not the people who think fear makes you obedient. Her gaze held his for a long moment, and then she moved again, circling him slowly. The air shimmered faintly where her presence concentrated, bending light in subtle waves. Jalen could feel the charge in the metal floor, the static in the cell, and beneath it all, the steady warmth of her body radiating like a sun caught in chains. They said I would kill, she said, voice low, almost a growl. They said if I ever trusted, I would die. You will die if you let them control you, he replied. But not because of me. Caliph tilted her head, the filament-like strands of her hair shimmering. For the first time, she seemed uncertain, the predator instinct conflicting with something new, fragile, and dangerous, curiosity. She crouched lower, claws splaying, and then extended a hand, not to strike, but to touch. Jalen met it halfway, fingertips brushing her scales. Warmth radiated through him, deep and steady, a current that bypassed logic. You are different, she said finally. You are not afraid. I am afraid, he admitted. But fear doesn't have to make me hurt you. Her lips twitched, as though tasting the concept. You confuse me. Good, he said, a faint smile brushing his face. It means I'm alive. Above them, the monitoring arrays flickered violently. The AI core running the cell systems detected fluctuations that no protocol could explain, the dragon's energy signature stabilizing instead of escalating, human neural waves harmonizing with Dracarian bioelectric output, and the nanodust, tiny, floating fragments of his hive's memory, shifting in response to her presence. The analysts on the upper decks murmured, fingers frozen over control pads. Something was happening that no one had predicted. Caliph crouched lower, and a faint rumble of her throat resonated through the floor. Jalen noticed the chains slackening slightly, energy restraint pulses weakening, responding to the change in her biofeedback. He understood then that her control was growing, not over him, but over herself. Her engineered aggression was not gone, it was being replaced by something new, awareness, and perhaps something he dared to call choice. "I remember them," she said suddenly, voice soft, trembling almost. "The ones before me. Queens of fire, rulers of stars. We were feared, yes, but not alone. We were guided by something greater. And then, betrayal. They destroyed us all, left me in chains." He listened, the faint hum of the cell a steady counterpoint to her words. "You've survived," he said. "That is something no one else could take away." Her eyes glimmered, reflecting a mixture of sorrow and nascent comprehension. "Survived, not to burn, but to feel." "Yes," he said, reaching slowly for her hand again. "To choose who you are." The field shuddered, a warning pulse from the monitoring systems, but Caliph ignored it. She extended both hands now, and for a moment, Jalen felt the full weight of her presence, the raw potential of scales, muscle, and flame, contained yet unyielding. He pressed his palms against hers, and the energy that surged was not violent, but alive, pulsing with rhythm like the hive back home. Sparks of plasma danced between them, and the nanodust spiraled, responding to the living current. A sudden alarm cut through the calm, a sharp pulse from the surveillance system, signaling a protocol override. Guards were moving to intervene, their heavy boots vibrating through the metal corridors. Jalen's heart leapt. "They're coming," he whispered. Caliph did not roar. She did not attack. She inhaled deeply, the glowing light of her eyes steadying. Then, in a voice that was both human and unearthly, she said, "I will not hurt you. But they will not take me either." The air shimmered violently as she flexed her wings, plasma streaking along the veins like captured lightning. When she exhaled, the heat was overwhelming yet controlled, concentrated in waves that warped the magnetic field but did not burn. She had learned to contain herself, to shape the weapon she had been born into something deliberate, something defensive. Jalen realized then that their bond was no longer theoretical, it was functional. His calm, his presence, and even the faint hum of the nanodust had taught her restraint, even as the instinct to dominate still simmered within. They were an experiment neither the Council nor the AI had planned, predator and human, linked by trust rather than fear. Caliph lowered her head, letting her eyes meet his. "Teach me," she whispered. Jalen nodded. "I will." The chains fell slack, responding to her will as if acknowledging her new choice. Outside, the corridors shook with the approach of enforcers, but inside the cell, a new law prevailed, control was no longer imposed from above. It existed between them, a fragile harmony of warmth and caution, fire and patience. As the hours bled into each other, the nanodust circled them like living starlight, tracing invisible patterns in the air. And for the first time in a lifetime of captivity, Caliph allowed herself to rest, settling closer to Jalen, her breath a slow, steady cadence that matched his own. The machine observers above could only record and speculate, unaware that what they were witnessing was the birth of something unprecedented, a Dracarian capable of choosing compassion over destruction, guided not by orders, but by quiet trust. The warning sirens never came. Instead, a faint vibration thrummed through the floor, subtle but insistent, like a heartbeat. Jalen felt it first in the soles of his boots, then through the walls of the cell itself. Calitha's eyes snapped open, golden orbs blazing in the dim light. She crouched low, wings flexing, sensing the shift in the magnetic fields. "They're coming," she said, her voice a whisper that carried more weight than any shout. He nodded, slipping a hand into his pocket. The hive relay, still faintly active, pulsed in response to the changes in her bioelectric field. Jalen realized that between the two of them, they could influence the cell's systems. The nanodust, scattered in spiraling currents around them, responded to her presence, bending light into shapes that almost seemed alive. "We can use this," he murmured. Caliph tilted her head, curiosity and caution warring in her gaze. Use it for what? For freedom, he said. We've learned the rhythm of the field, the patterns of the sensors, the pulse of the energy conduits. We can escape. Her laughter was low, almost a growl, a sound that vibrated through the metal walls. You make it sound simple. Nothing worth escaping is ever simple, he replied. But we have an advantage they didn't expect, you've changed. She flexed her claws, sparks running along the edges, testing containment limits. And you trust me to hold it? I trust you to live, he said. And I trust the hive to help. Minutes, or perhaps hours, passed as they prepared. Jalen activated a low-frequency pulse from the relay, small enough to avoid immediate detection but enough to interfere with the magnetic locks. The nanodust shimmered in response, swirling around Caliph like golden fire, aligning with her bioelectric field. She exhaled, letting the heat from her body resonate with the pulse, bending energy lines until the restraints hummed and loosened. One by one, the chains gave way, responding not to brute force, but to controlled harmony. The corridor beyond the cell was already alive with movement. Guards in mirrored exosuits advanced, unaware that the field around Caliph now absorbed their sensor signals. Jalen and Caliph waited, blending into the faint hum of the cell as if part of its rhythm. When the first step echoed too close, Caliph flexed her wings. A controlled blast of plasma surged across the magnetic barriers, melting locks without triggering alarms. Sparks danced like fireflies, illuminating her face and scales in shifting patterns of gold and crimson. Jalen moved beside her, keeping low, his pulse matching hers. The nanodust responded to his neural signature, forming spirals of light that interfered with optical sensors. Every motion was deliberate, a coordinated dance of predator and human, of technology and instinct. The AI core monitoring them paused repeatedly, unable to reconcile the anomaly, a Dracarian who did not attack, a human who guided her without fear, and the machine intelligence itself reacting to emotion rather than protocol. As they emerged from the cell, the corridors stretched like a labyrinth. The walls shimmered with energy conduits that pulsed under Caliph's influence. She led, moving with the grace of a living weapon now tempered by understanding. Jalen followed, his relay emitting subtle pulses, creating a feedback loop with her bioelectric field. Doors opened before them, sensors misfiring, alarms suppressed by the interference. Every step was a negotiation with the systems around them, bending the architecture itself to their will. They reached the observation bay overlooking the maintenance ducts. The twin moons of Tyrian IV glimmered in the distance, a reminder of the freedom waiting beyond the steel. Caliph paused, crouching at the edge, wings flickering to adjust gravity shifts. It's a long fall, she murmured, almost to herself. We have to take it, he said. The ducts are the only path to the surface. Trust me. With a silent nod, she launched herself first, wings flaring in controlled arcs, plasma flowing along the veins like liquid lightning. Jalen followed, feeling the tug of the magnetic field as his body adjusted midair. The ducts swallowed them, long tubes of cold metal and winding conduits that seemed almost alive, resonating with the nanodust spirals. The hive responded, guiding them, forming a shimmering ribbon of light that illuminated their path. They emerged into the lower maintenance ring, a forgotten area of the station where old drones lay dormant. Calitha's presence awakened them, millions of tiny automata stirring in synchronized patterns, their programming responding to her bioelectric resonance. The drones formed a living bridge, a path over broken conduits and open shafts. Jalen marveled, realizing the hive had become an ally, a swarm of intelligence dancing with Calitha's instinct and his guidance. The final corridor loomed ahead, leading to the surface of Rin. Energy fields pulsed, and he could hear the distant hum of reinforcements approaching. Caliph crouched, wings flaring faintly, her body a coil of restrained power. Are you ready? She asked. He nodded, gripping the hive relay tightly. Always. Together, they surged forward, Calitha's plasma bending the field lines, Jalen guiding the nanodust and drones in harmony. The corridor lit up in flashes of gold and crimson, the energy conduits bending around them like living metal. When they finally breached the final door, the twin suns of Rin's surface spilled light across them, the golden fields of microbes shimmering in the wind, welcoming their return. Caliph landed first, talons sinking into the soft synthetic soil of the hive fields. Jalen followed, exhaling a long breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Around them, millions of bees lifted in response to her presence, a living storm of gold that bent and shifted with the rhythm of her heartbeat. She looked at him, and for the first time, her expression was not one of predator or prisoner, but of wonder. The world, it is still alive. He smiled, brushing dust from his sleeves. And it's waiting for us to protect it. The AI core above the station struggled to process the breach, but the lesson was clear: control could be disrupted by trust, by understanding, by bonds that transcended chains and fear. And on the surface of Rin, predator and human stood together, their steps in sync, the hive singing around them, a signal to the galaxy that what had been engineered for destruction could choose creation instead. The hive field stretched endlessly beneath the twin suns, a living ocean of golden light that shimmered and pulsed with every movement of Caliph's wings. The microbes swarmed in perfect synchronicity, their paths weaving intricate patterns across the sky. Jalen moved slowly through them, breathing in the warm scent of engineered nectar and sunlight. He had expected chaos, the panic of guards, the whine of alarms, but none of it had followed them. The station above remained silent, powerless to intervene, as if acknowledging that the balance had shifted. Caliph lowered herself beside him, her massive wings folding around her body, casting a protective shadow. The scales along her arms and back caught the light, refracting it in molten hues of copper and bronze. Her golden eyes, wide and luminous, scanned the horizon, tracing the currents of bees as they spiraled toward the distant colonies. She exhaled softly, and the heat of her body rippled across the fields like a living wind. "They are still watching," she murmured, voice low and wary. "Somewhere," Jalen admitted, though he did not look up. "But they won't interfere now. Not when the hive recognizes you as part of its code." Calitha's gaze followed his hand, now brushing gently over the nearest swarm. The nano-dust that had followed them from the cell hovered in the air, intertwining with the living microbes, forming fractal spirals that seemed almost conscious. She reached out, claws extended, and the swarm bent to her will, flowing around her fingers like liquid gold. The rhythm was hypnotic, a pulse that resonated with the hum of her own heart. "I can feel them," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "The memory of the hive, of life, of freedom. I've never known this." Jalen knelt beside her, pressing a hand to her scaled shoulder. "You're not meant to just survive, Caliph. You're meant to choose what life is for you. And now, you can." For a long while, they remained like that, the golden storm of bees curling around them, the twin suns painting the world in light and warmth. Far above, the remnants of the AI core that had monitored them flickered on, attempting to calculate the impossible, a predator choosing restraint, a human guiding with patience, and a swarm of mechanized life responding to emotion rather than command. Its circuits shivered with a new concept: bond. The first scouts of the consortium arrived later that day, descending from silent gliders. They paused at the edge of the fields, weapons raised, unsure whether to engage or retreat. The sight that greeted them froze every hand: Caliph, enormous and radiant, kneeling beside a man who smelled of sun and honey, the air between them humming with a resonance that no weapon could pierce. Around them, the hive moved like a living fortress, a golden sea that flowed with purpose and awareness. A senior officer raised a voice over the comms. "Step forward, human. You are under arrest, Dracarian subject is to be contained." Jalen slowly stood, raising his hands not in surrender, but in a gesture of calm. "You won't contain her," he said, voice steady. "Not anymore. And I won't let you." Caliph lifted her head, scales glowing faintly as the energy within her coiled, ready but restrained. The hive responded instantly, forming a defensive perimeter around them. Sparks danced through the air, not attacks but warnings, a shimmering wall of light and intent. The soldiers hesitated, sensing that no conventional means would succeed. The lead officer swallowed hard. "It's obeying her." "Not obeying," Jalen said. "Respecting. Recognition. Life knows its own." The silence stretched, heavy and absolute. Then Caliph exhaled, the heat washing over the fields in a gentle wave rather than flame. The drones and bees swirled higher, forming patterns that communicated no threat, only warning, leave, or be changed. Slowly, the gliders backed away, their mission abandoned. The galaxy's enforcers had learned, finally, that some forces were beyond control. Night fell, and the twin moons rose, casting silver shadows across the high fields. Caliph curled beside Jalen, her body a living wall of warmth. He rested his head against her chest, listening to the steady thrum of her heartbeat. The field of golden bees shimmered softly around them, settling like a gentle rain. For the first time in his life, he felt completely unafraid. "They say I was made to kill," Caliph murmured, her voice faint against the chorus of the hive. "But I never needed to. Not with you." "You taught me something too," Jalen replied. "That even the fiercest heart can choose calm, even when everything else says fire." They fell into silence, letting the hum of life and machine fill the night. Above them, distant stars blinked in the void, witnesses to the impossible harmony that had formed on Rin. The hive pulsed once more, a living signal stretching across the colonies, telling all who could see that creation could emerge from destruction, that choice could exist where none had been expected. Jalen shifted, feeling the rise and fall of Calitha's chest beneath his head. Her warmth was steady, a living counterpoint to the cold metals of the station far above. Around them, the bees rose again, forming intricate constellations of gold and light, patterns that mirrored the galaxy above. For Caliph, for Jalen, for the hive, there was only this: peace earned, trust built, and the knowledge that together they had changed the rules of survival. She shifted, curling around him protectively, her wings folding in slow arcs that seemed to cradle not just him, but the very air of the world. Jalen closed his eyes, listening to the soft resonance of the hive, the warmth of her scales, the subtle electricity in the air. Somewhere beyond, the galaxy moved on, unaware that it had witnessed a miracle, a predator tamed not by chains or fear, but by calm, compassion, and connection. And in that quiet, golden field, under the twin moons, two lives slept, entwined not in need, not in command, but in trust. The stars above bore witness to their bond, and the hive sang softly, a song of survival, of choice, and of beginnings that would ripple across the cosmos long after the humans and the dragons had closed their eyes. Jalen's last thought, drifting into the warmth of Calitha's chest, was simple and true: some fires do not burn to destroy, they burn to illuminate. And in that illumination, even the darkest corners of the galaxy could find light.